are having to contend with at this time. Increasing cost of living, economic hardship has continued to define the first year of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the president's administration. Nigerians are continuing to bemoan, in fact, daily, the precarious economic situation and the conditions they find themselves in. Asiwaju has come out in recent time to say that the radical economic reforms might plunge the majority of Nigerians into hardship, but it was necessary for the economic prosperity that will follow. I know you do not react to comments and statements, but in your opinion, do you think President Bola Tinubu can find a solution before it's too late?
You know, I think one of the biggest problems we have as a collective is a chronic inability to connect cause and effect. I remember sitting in this same chair. You were right there as well. Just a little over a year ago, and we were talking, and I was specific in saying that Nigeria had been damaged beyond repair by Buhari, and that anyone who is going to rescue Nigeria would have to reimagine it and then rebuild it from the ruins of the Buhari regime. That was what I said, sat in this seat. And I did say in addendum at the time that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is incapable of envisioning a future for Nigeria because he's part and parcel, integral part and parcel of the horrible past of this country. Nobody alive is more responsible for the emergence of the Buhari regime than Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He's on record as having honed it himself. So when I hear the man talking as though there is a disconnect between his, I don't even know, because this is not even a man we elected, between himself and the despicable man named Buhari that has left the office. When I hear that disconnect, it baffles me that there can be such inability or maybe wanton wickedness. Because if he says he has inherited a bad situation, the question is from who? It's the same people, the same character, it's the same man. He was there for 8 years during the Buhari administration. He had nothing to say against Buhari. And when he was coming, he made clear that he was going to continue the policies of the Buhari administration. So when the man is now pontificating and talking about difficult economic decisions and that is a difficult thing to react to, it's like asking me to react to madness. I know as a fact, and I sat here over a year ago to tell you what to expect. I told you at the time that he is one of the two horsemen of the apocalypse. And today, you have a disaster succeeding a calamity. Because that's the best way to describe this succession of madness. So anybody who is expecting that there will be a course correction because Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the one sat in the office and not Buhari, the person is wasting his time. Asking me to react to it, I'm sure you already knew what I was going to say anyway, because as far as I'm concerned, it's like asking the difference between 6 and half a dozen. It's the same family. The same crime family that had been in office in Nigeria is still the same crime family that is in power. So let's not waste our time reacting to what are obvious lies. Bola Tinubu cannot do better than he's doing. He would actually do much worse than Buhari by the end of the day. Anyone who manages to survive however long his reign might be, the person should thank their stars.
How clueless is this president as far as you know?
What do you mean clueless? Let's be clear. When we excuse the madness we see on account of the cluelessness or inability of those who rule Nigeria, we're actually making strategic errors. They know exactly what they are doing at every point in time. The man is on record. He said, reduce their purchasing power, widen the tax net. All those things the man was saying and everybody was busy catching cruise and laughing at the time. That's exactly what he is doing. The IMF and the World Bank, the Western powers have always wanted the Naira to be floated. But no president of Nigeria had ever found the balls to do it because they all knew it was going to have ruinous effect on socioeconomic indices of Nigeria. So they balked at doing it. But now you have a man in power who is not, he doesn't care one bit. He knows that he owns the press effectively. The press will see the truth and not confront him with it. We would all pretend that it is because of his cluelessness or inability. They are geniuses at the task of ruining the people. This is not by accident. It's not by accident that we don't have electricity in Nigeria. It's deliberate. It's not by accident that we are probably the poorest paid in the whole of Africa. It's not by accident. It's not by accident that the state is mollycoddling terrorism and pretending not to know the fact that one of the greatest contributors to food inflation in Nigeria is insecurity. And yet the same government ignores the impunity with which the Fulani marauders are entering villages and farms and making it impossible for people to stay in their farms and produce. It is not impossible that this is not beyond their human capacity to know that without energy, the manufacturing sector, the real sectors cannot work. It's not, look, in the last couple of weeks, the most I have had public power, maybe 4 hours a day. And in my case, a lot of people have told me that that is actually pretty high. Some people haven't had light for days. So if you are a carpenter, if you are a tailor, a barber, whatever you're doing at some productive level, you're already hampered. Or you're going to go buy petrol to power the generator at over 600 naira per liter. The fact of the matter is that the ruination of the Nigerian people is not due to the imbecility of the ruiners. It is actually deliberate policies designed to make sure that the people are preoccupied with existential considerations and never able to question them, even as they destroy the country.
So, consider the fact that you just said that this is quite a deliberate action.
It is.
How do you, and in one of the recent tweets, you had actually said that if you thought it couldn't get any worse than this crooked disaster, Tinubu has come, the horseman of the apocalypse. And at some point in time, you actually stated that this is like incompetency meeting complicity. How do we juxtapose that?
Look, Gomez, I think it was Lord Baelish, Lord Baelish in Game of Thrones. He said something that I found very instructive. He said when you are confronted with a situation that does not appear to make sense, instead of trying to make sense of what does not make sense, just accept that it doesn't make sense and then step back and take another look. A man that came to the public TV and was telling everybody how we have to make hard decisions and sacrifices, he has presided over a government that is second to none in less than 9 months in looting the Commonwealth. This same man has presided over the purchase of SUVs for members of the National Assembly. They've continued to live large as though nothing is wrong in the country. This same government gave 24 billion for Hajj subsidy in a country where people are dying like flies from hunger. This government has presided over the murder of numerous Nigerians in places like Bokos, in the Plateau, in the Benue Trough. Ekiti, Ondo have become killing fields where Obas are slaughtered like flies. And look, let's be clear. Nigerians need to come to the knowledge of the fact that their government is peopled by those who have determined that the people themselves are enemies and must be eliminated. So it is the mindset that we need to shift pretty quickly. Looking to this government or the ruiners of Nigeria for the solution to the problems of Nigeria is a waste of time. As long as these same people remain in power, the Nigerian is an endangered species.
There was a report from the Economic Intelligence Unit, and it had forecasted for Nigeria with warnings of substantial political instability risk due to high inflation, low economic growth, and unpopular market reforms. How do you perceive the potential impact of these factors on the country's political landscape, especially considering the administration's current trajectory?
Look, I think it was the chief Alagbe of the APC, Wasiu. I remember a refrain from a song. He said, you ain't seen nothing yet. That's the reality. I don't need an economic think tank to tell me the realities of my objective living in this country. On a daily basis, it's getting progressively worse. The one thing that I believe is left for the conscious, if you have any consciousness of what is good in this country, you have a duty to educate the common man on the street as to the fact that his enemy is not Chinedu, his enemy is not Fakunle, his enemy is not Ahmed. His enemies are the ones who are ruining the country, pretending to be leaders. They are only leading us to disasters. The main reason why I'm saying this is so that the common man does not turn on his brother when he should be looking firmly in the direction of the ruiners of Nigeria, both temporal and spiritual, from the churches to the mosques to the governors' lodges to the houses of assemblies to the National Assembly to the judicial chambers. You have crooks ruining this country, and they have determined that it is not interest, for that matter, that the Nigerian be emancipated. Poverty has become a real weapon in the hands of those who rule Nigeria. So the Economic Intelligence Unit are only telling us what we know. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. A country where people are stealing more oil than is being declared as produced, where oil producers are stealing their own oil in collusion with our navy. How much oil are they bunkering in the Niger Delta? How much oil are they burning to produce diesel in the creeks? We are not talking about canoes. As long as the underlying issues are not addressed, as long as criminality has been licensed and impunity has become the order of the day, there is nothing anybody needs to say. Eventually, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. At some point, this system is going to grind to a halt. My own singular interest is in making sure that the mass of the people do not turn against themselves, believing that they are their own. No, the real enemies are sat in government offices. The average Nigerian needs to wise up to the fact that they are merely distracting us when they start pointing at religion and ethnicity. Have you noticed that each and every one of those who have gone to the National Assembly, whether they went as Labour Party members or PDP or PUPUPU or APC, they've become one. So the ruling class is one. They have managed to make sure that there is this level of ideological syncretism that has ensured that they've become one. Regardless of their differences, they are one in making sure that the Nigerian is emasculated. When it comes to regulating the social media, you will find that they will unite behind the agenda. Everything that is anti-people, they always unite against it because they have common interest. It is the common man that needs to find his own common interest and common grounds behind which to rally. Our reality is that we have been effectively enslaved by a ruining class that has no sympathy or empathy for the Nigerian. They are not touched by our afflictions. It's almost like they actually take pleasure from our suffering. Think about it. How do you explain that Hajj, that should be your private obligation as a Muslim, has become a burden on the public purse, and you can pay subsidy on Hajj for a select few, but education is no longer available to the poor? It's about enlightened selfish interest. The Nigerian who is the victim has to decide what is in his own enlightened selfish interest and stop listening to the ruiners to tell him who his enemies are.
Now, Mr. Farotimi, we've seen pockets of protests in certain, sections of the country, like in the north, and just recently in Otta, there was this protest also against hunger, against the economic situations. Now, are we foreseeing a further, a larger, right? Because considering the fact that you're talking about educating the people themselves, and Nigerians themselves are bemoaning their situation at this point in time, and you're painting a gloomy picture that things are even going to get worse. At what point will it get to before Nigerians themselves actually stand up and not confront themselves with it?
I repeat that thing again. You ain't seen nothing yet. Nothing. There is no bottom for the naira. It keeps crashing every day, even for products that are made in Nigeria. A bag of cement today is over 10,000 naira. A bag of cement. Let that sink in, and then let me begin to explain something. You're seeing pockets of protests here and there. I remember saying some years back that the Nigerian revolution will start in northern Nigeria. I stand by what I said at the time. Now, how long it will take before the inevitable would happen, I don't know. But one thing that is clear and glaring is that given the level of weaponized poverty that has been unleashed against the people, is nuclear grade. When you see the number of Nigerians scooping hot food off boiling cauldrons, packing rice with sand, you then begin to have a glimpse, just a mere glimpse into what lies ahead, because it's just starting. And people who are in farm, I used to farm. I've abandoned my farms. I can't go to my farms again. My farms are in Ogun State, but I cannot go to my farms any longer. I know people who had major mechanized farming operations in Niger State. They've left their operation. They abandoned it completely because where they were farming have been taken over by terrorists. So when you are seeing all of these, let me just say, it is easy to predict the harvest when you see the seed. The seed that have been planted, I've made it clear that a deadlock is inevitable. You have a government that is lacking in legitimacy. You have a judiciary that is lacking in credibility. You have a legislative house that is generally peopled by idiots, imbeciles, and crooks. And then you have a people against whom hunger has been weaponized. Yorubas have a proverb. They say, Tebiba wonu, oromi okin wo. When you translate that properly, what it actually says is that rationality ends where hunger begins. When you now have hunger unleashed against a wide swath of the population, what you will find eventually are gridlocks and chaos. My own preoccupation is to ensure that the Nigerian understand exactly who to blame for what is going on, so that he doesn't turn against his fellow victim. It is possible that you might have military adventurists coming in to cash in on the popular disaffection. But even those would inevitably be proxies and members of this ruining crash. The reality is that we are gradually entering an unsustainable cycle where there is bound to be a gridlock. I am careful about what I speak to these days. That's why I've been largely quiet for some time, because I do not want to stand accused of being the one who incited a riot. I'm not interested in riots. Protests do not interest me. I am interested in a revolution that sweeps away this decadent order and hold it and every one of them to account. Let them account for the humongous stealings. Let them account for the evils they have done against the people. That interests me. Pockets of protest here and there, yeah. But they are merely, when it is going to rain, you see flashy